1. When I was about 13, this nice family moved out of their house in the Prescott Country Club, Dewey, Arizona, just down the block from my family. A strange guy moved in, and the condition of the property rapidly deteriorated. The day he moved in, he had a large U-Haul type truck, which was fine, but the thing never left. It stayed parked in the driveway. It also had an extension cord running from the house out to the truck. I thought that was weird. Eventually, there were paint cans all over the yard, random junk on the side of the house, a real mess. This was not welcome in the small community, but anybody who talked to the guy came away saying the dude was weird and they needed to tread lightly. I mowed lawns and was hired to do our friend's lawn while they were on an extended vacation. They lived next to this weird guy. Every day when I was sweating my ass off mowing, I could see this weirdo spying on me through the blinds in his living room. He wasn't very good at hiding it. Every day. I kept looking back at him and giving him weird looks, hoping he'd knock it off. Well, fast forward 2 years, and my family is watching the 5 p.m. news while we eat dinner, and they start reporting on a developing case where a woman's frozen body was found inside a freezer in a rider's truck. They showed the house, and we all went silent and stopped chewing. I ran outside and looked down the street, and sure enough, every news agency in the state had a truck parked in the street. Satellite dishes extended. Cops had everything cordoned off. This guy had abducted a 23-year-old woman on a Los Angeles freeway, raped, murdered, and then stored her dead body in a freezer, which eventually went into the truck and was driven to Arizona, where he moved next door to his mother, who of course had no idea. 2. I had a co-worker turn really creepy on me. What really sucks about it is that he seemed like a halfway decent guy before he got into the alcohol. I'm pretty sure he got depressed. We were all working in a toxic environment, and to some extent, we all had problems because of it. Or if we went into that job with physical or mental illnesses, the work environment exacerbated them. It was that kind of workplace. I should have quit years before I did, but live and learn. As I was saying, he got into alcohol pretty bad somewhere down the line, and would always complain of sleep issues. He ended up doing something really dumb. He combined his sleep meds with alcohol, something I warned him not to do, because people often sleepwalk on that drug, and ended up wrapping his car around a tree. He's lucky to be alive, real lucky to be alive. And because he was one of the kinder people I worked with and didn't make me feel like I was automatically a shit, lazy worker because of an illness I couldn't control, I wanted to pay the kindness forward. He was down to getting to and from work on a bike. I helped him out by driving him home on the mornings when I could. Graveyard shift is a bitch enough, without having to ride a bike home in the rain. But he still continued to drink, and later I learned into other crap. Sometimes he'd get these really manic episodes and do really dumb shit like drag us to the parking lot to look at his new vehicle when we were not supposed to leave the shop. And one evening I got up and walked away from him because he continued to give me way too much information about his sex life. He claimed he didn't know he was upsetting me, though I was saying repeatedly, "Creeper coworker, stop. Creeper coworker, stop. Creeper coworker, fucking stop." He apologized profusely for that, and was acting sincerely confused. Considering he was either drunk or high, there's a good chance he didn't catch my protests. But it's still no excuse to lay out the details of his intercourse with an ex in such gory graphic highlights that it turned my already fragile stomach. What really put the strain on the friendship and the final nail in the coffin were the drunken phone calls. I don't like being around drunk people, unless I'm also drunk, at the best of times. I certainly don't like being rambled at about what to do with my life by someone who was fucking up their own, and for some reason, this was a pastime of his. That and laying on the compliments to an almost absurd capacity, while alternately hinting that I don't have self-confidence. This was ironic, considering how codependent he was. He moved to the state I'm in and left a life he seemed really happy with behind, to follow a girl that would ultimately break up with him. When he couldn't get with another co-worker I was friends with because he creeped her out for coming on too strong, he turned to me. He finally confessed that he liked me more as a friend, to which I politely but firmly turned him down. He was at least 10 years my senior, and he was making some really bad choices. I liked and trusted him when I first met him, and to me, that's the really creepy element of this tale, what drugs and alcohol can do to a person. I got out of the bad work environment, and back into one just as shitty, sadly. Must be the water in this area. But my health improved nonetheless. I found a good doctor and got to the root cause of many of my issues, anxiety being a factor. I even went to counseling because I was determined not to let it ruin me. I saw him one more time during this period when he was living with some new girl. I congratulated him on also escaping the hellhole we had both come from, and had a pretty amiable conversation with him. He seemed to be doing better. 2 days later, he called me drunk and started the same shit. I ended the call from him and deleted his number. I was working through my own shit at the time and was not about to get sucked back into his. He left me a message apologizing. I never responded. Present day. I came to the conclusion that the source of a lot of my depression and unhappiness was due to the fact that I simply hate where I live. There's nothing here, no opportunities, and it's like living in a vacuum. No matter what you do, you're stuck. Plus, I needed to spread my wings and take some risks. I had tried living the cookie-cutter life that people expected on me, and it had almost killed me. I managed to get a job elsewhere, and, in a huge stroke of fortune, managed to keep one of my current jobs because it is nationwide. I'm finally getting out. Then, about a night or two ago, guess who calls me? Creeper co-worker. I should not have answered at all. I didn't recognize the number and it was late. But I was awake and curious. In hindsight, I should have told him he had the wrong number and hung up. Damn my soft heart. He asked how I was doing, but in truth, he was not really interested. He rattled on about how he had been through rehab for drugs and alcohol. I knew about the drinking, but not the drugs. Now a lot of his manic behavior makes sense. Anyway, one of the first things he says is, "I got my own place. I'm not with a girl anymore." It just seemed like such an awkward and random statement that I didn't know what to say. I was empathetic but cautious. He didn't drop that statement for no reason. I expressed my happiness for him and that he was getting better and getting help. He began to gush on about how his therapist had told him to keep connections with the positive people in his life, and that I was one of the people in his life that he had believed to be truly good and beautiful and smart. He went on about how attractive I looked that day he had seen me at my new job for longer than I was comfortable with. But he didn't say anything inappropriate, so I just continued to listen with a cautious ear. He talked about moving back to his home state, and I will say I was genuinely pleased and happy on his behalf. I'm happy for anyone who can get out of this rut of a county. Which led me to tell him of my new employment opportunity, and how glad I was that we were both doing so well for ourselves, considering where we had been. That's where it went downhill. I can't say what went first, chicken or egg, but that did not make him happy. He got pretty flustered and agitated. "You don't need to go there to be happy. Listen, come back with me. You'd love it there." I just kind of went silent and I pulled the phone away from my mouth in case I started nervous laughter. What? I kind of laughed it off and reiterated that I have not even started or been through orientation for my new employment. I'm trying to build a better life for myself. I can't go on a vacation out of state. I haven't even been able to visit my best friend in Canada. I'm not going up north with some random former co-worker that's still obviously creeping on me. I didn't tell him that last part, but what he said next pretty much confirms it. I'm not saying to be my girlfriend. Just come see the mountains. I'm telling you, you won't want to leave. I'm not going to try to have sex with you or anything. I never said anything about sex or being his girlfriend. He repeated that a couple of times in the conversation. Plus, I read this wonderful book called The Gift of Fear a while back, and I encourage every man and woman to read it, especially women. The harder someone is trying to convince you they are not up to anything nefarious, the more likely they are. Why is this guy calling me randomly to tell me that he had a new house, has no girlfriend? Yet he's moving after getting a new house? But he's trying to convince me very hard to jeopardize my future and just leave the state with him on a whim, for something platonic. My conclusion, this guy is a liar and he's nuts. He layered on so strong at the beginning of the conversation how pretty I am, how I am such an awesome intelligent woman, and then he drops the bomb. This is someone who doesn't want to screw me, remember? Someone who just wants to be my friend. I don't remember what I said, but it was basically something like, "No dude, I have plans, I worked my ass off to get the opportunity I've gotten, and I'm not going to just get on a plane with you." From there, he just crossed the line even further, said I was making a mistake, missing an opportunity, he was not offering anyone else. What the fuck? And do what when I get out of state, if not be his girlfriend? I have no job, no friends, no contacts out there. How was I missing out on life, etc.? I told him something like, "It's been nice chatting, I'm going now." I didn't let him answer, I hung up, I blocked his number. I think this story may have been more bizarre than creepy. But it is a real story. Needless to say, I have not been regretting my choice to block him. Let's never meet again, ex-co-worker. 3. When I was about 17 or so, I had moved back home to the beach after staying out in Washington for a bit, after earning my GED. Not long after I got back, I made some new friends, with one in particular, Chris. This story isn't about him, but how meeting him was probably the worst thing that could have happened. Now, we used to hang out all the time and smoke weed, drive around aimlessly, go out to bars, etc. Just your everyday teenager stuff. We were, however, pretty into urban exploration, I guess you could say. We used to go into the woods all the time in random places just to explore. We live in a big city, so there isn't much adventure in the concrete jungle. Anyway, one night we were driving along this huge stretch of road, one city over. Chris, B, a female friend, and myself. It's probably about 7:30 p.m. in the middle of summer. There are usually street lamps in most parts of the city, but it was pitch black, with thick woods on either side of the street. The sun hadn't set yet, but you couldn't see anything below the tree line. Chris decides to tell us about this path in the woods that connects to neighborhoods he used to use as a kid, and how it's a cool spot to smoke up with rope swings and benches and stuff, so of course we're like, yeah, let's go. We make our way into the woods down the only path we can see, and it's well beaten. A clear sign is used often. I never worried about weird things happening because, they always happen to someone else. As we got to the bench in the middle of the path, we sat down and rolled up. B was making a spectacle of playing on the rope swing that hung out over the ditch that was about 6 feet or so deep. So we finish rolling up, and we have 2 really nice blunts, lit up, and we're just sitting there bullshitting, having a good time. And out of nowhere, the air seemed to get really thick. It's hard to explain, but my throat started getting tight, it was harder to breathe. I started getting lightheaded for seemingly no reason at all. It took me a minute to realize what I was feeling was dread, just sheer terror, and I didn't know why. Before I could even ask my friends if they felt it, we heard footsteps, and no sooner did we take notice than 3 men were standing within 5 feet of our circle. Now it's pitch black, we have no lights, just the cherry of our lit smoke. These men look like nothing but shadows in the dark. We can't see their faces, clothes, anything. It was extremely unnerving to say the least. After what felt like forever, one of them spoke to us. "Hey, what are you guys doing out here so late?" I answered them, "Oh, we're just cutting through. We stopped to smoke up." "Mind if we join you?" Now, obviously, it would have been better to tell these guys to fuck off, but I didn't want to set anyone off, so I told them yes. I don't think things would have gone differently if I had told them no. Anyway, so one of them sits next to us on the bench and just starts small talk, asking things like, "What do you guys do for work? Where are you from?" etc. It wasn't polite small talk, it was like he was trying to keep us distracted, which I didn't notice at the time. He kept talking as he gave one of our blunts to his friend, who, I'll remind you, hasn't said a word and didn't sit either. The other two just stood next to the bench, looking like they were waiting for something. I passed the other blunt to our new friend, hoping they are just trying to get a free smoke out. I couldn't have been more wrong. No sooner than the three men have both of our smokes do they all get really stiff, like statuesque, and reach into their pockets and, you guessed it, all three of them were armed. Now I'm standing there thinking that they just wanted our weed, and didn't want us to argue about it. Then came the stereotypical, "Give me everything you have." As the guns were drawn and literally put within an inch of my face, I could almost look straight down the barrel. Damn the darkness, I was so close to it. I just stood there. I didn't move at all. I guess I was kind of in shock, like I really didn't believe what was happening. Then out of nowhere, the man to my left let a round off right next to my ear. Now, if you think a gunshot is loud when you hear it on your street, you have no idea how loud it is when it goes off right next to your head. I jumped about 10 feet and rushed to empty my pockets. I gave them my phone and my wallet without hesitation. My friends followed suit, and I thought that was the end of it. We weren't so lucky. This did nothing but make them even madder. They were pissed they only got 2 cell phones and maybe $40 from 3 people. Since our car was still parked out on the street, they assumed we must have more valuables inside. One of the men grabbed Chris by the collar of his shirt and told him that he was going to walk them to the car and let them take what they needed. B and I, of course, protested, and we were met with more guns in our faces. 2 of the men took Chris out to the car, while the third looked at us and said, "Now I'm going to walk halfway up the path and find me a nice bush to lay low. If either of you run or do anything smart, I'll be waiting with a bullet." And he walked down the path after Chris and the other man. B and I stood there in the middle of the woods in complete silence for a good while. We talked about how good our chances were if we tried to make a run for it, and immediately decided against it. I wasn't sure if the guy was bluffing or if he really was waiting in a bush to shoot us. It felt like we were there forever, and out of nowhere, 3 more gunshots ring out from the street. B lost it. She started bawling right there in the woods, sobbing at the thought of Chris being murdered. I tried my best to console her, and almost strangled her at the same time. When I leaned in to hug her, I could see the light from her phone in her back pocket that she refused to give up. We used it to call 911, but never put the phone to our ear. We just called, and put it in her back pocket while talking about the situation. We were scared the guy in the path would see the light if we kept it out too long. We waited there in the woods for an eternity before we started seeing flashlights and hearing the barking of dogs. It was the police. I couldn't have been more relieved, and neither could B. She started sobbing all over again, and we walked out of the woods with the cops. They took B to the side, while they zip-tied me and put me in the back of a police cruiser. I started staring out the window, wondering why and where they took B before I noted Chris was sitting next to me. I started crying myself out of relief that he was alive and wondering what happened when they got to the street. He told me they brought him to the car and had him let them in. He said he had let them take whatever they wanted, which still wasn't much in terms of sellable. He said they got pissed and hit him, then shot off a few rounds before running into the woods on the opposite side of the street. I asked him if he told the cops that, and he said they wouldn't listen. It didn't take me long to find out why. They pulled me out of the car after talking to B, and I insisted they remove the zip ties if I wasn't being arrested. Why should I? Apparently, the police thought that B was in danger of us. Granted, I realize now that they were being diligent, but at the time I was not only offended but pissed off. They thought that Chris and I were back there trying to rape B or something just as heinous. It was pretty shocking that they straight up accused us of sexually assaulting her in the woods and refused to listen about the men. That is until B calmed down enough to tell them the same thing we did. Eventually they believed us, but it was too late, since it had almost been an hour since the men took off into the woods. They told B that she could drive her car home, but because Chris and I were adults, they wouldn't allow her to give us a ride back. So I asked the cop if he would take us home, and he declined. And not politely either. It was pretty clear they thought we weren't being 100% truthful about not messing with B in the woods. The cops left us there, standing in the middle of the road in pitch-black darkness, woods on either side, after being robbed at gunpoint, and the men probably still close by. I have never been that terrified in my entire life. We started walking down the street. I think we must have walked a good 5 miles the entire time, glancing over our shoulders, scanning the tree line. Every time we heard any sort of noise we jumped, and just stood still. Eventually we came to a main road and could see a shopping centre not far off. These were usually patrolled by security at night, so we thought it was our best bet. We get up to one of the main stores at Dollar General, and scan the lot of any type of security, and there was nothing. Not one car in the entire lot. Now these were back in the days of payphones, and luckily, there was one right outside. I got on my knees to scan the underside of a soda machine, and found just enough to make one call. We called Chrissy's brother, and thank God, he was awake and agreed to come meet us. I don't think I had ever been so relieved to get into a car in my life. He got us home safely, and all I could think about was if I would be deaf in my left ear forever, while trying to stop shaking. I lost my first cell phone I ever had, a new lost wallet, and almost my hearing, but I'm extremely glad I'm still alive despite everything. So, creepy men in the woods, stalking teens and robbing them. Let's never meet again. Hey everyone, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 3 True Scary Stories, episode 219. Thank you very much to everybody who let me use their stories in this video, and I mean that, massive thanks. These things are getting very hard to find. Which is why I think probably in the next, say, 2 weeks, I'm probably going to drop one of my 3 True Scary Stories videos, because I just don't have the stories for them, and I'm going to start doing 2 paranormal videos per week. And we'll do that until I can get more stories to go back to doing the other ones regularly. And that's really the only way it could work right now, so we'll muddle by, and we'll certainly still have stories every day though. Okay, and with that I'm going to head off for now, so until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.